Welcome back to Wellness as a Way of Life. I'm honored to have Lauren Chiren from Women of a Certain Stage on the podcast today. She is an entrepreneur passionate about supporting people to successfully navigate menopause. She provides evidence to the UK Parliament and sits on the BSI committee that created the landmark Standard on Menstruation, Menstrual Health, and Menopause. She is a regular commentator in the media and is a global keynote speaker, trainer, and coach on executive women's well-being. She left her senior role in financial services in her early 40s, believing that she was suffering from early onset dementia. We get into the details in this interview. Imagine her surprise when her doctor informed her that she quite simply had been through menopause. Today, she educates employers on why being menopause supportive is business savvy and supports high-performing people to navigate the changes and challenges of all things hormonal, from monthly cycles to menopause. As a trusted expert, Lauren has helped thousands of executives, celebrities, and athletes globally. She is qualified in psychology, mental health, nutrition, coaching, personal training, and soon to be a yoga teacher as well. She shares her knowledge and stimulates the debate on what being well means at all stages of life. Let's get into it. I really enjoyed this interview and it was such an honor to have her. Welcome to season 5 of the Wellness as a Way of Life podcast, the less is more source of wellness, knowledge, wisdom, and inspiration for female leaders and founders. Here, we teach you why not all wellness trends are for you, how to figure out which ones are, and how to best adapt them for your own personal wellness toolbox. Ultimately, we need to know how to integrate your wellness practices so fully that they become to feel like brushing your teeth, a foundational part of who you are and not a check mark on your to-do list. I'm your host, Megan Swan, creator of the Wellness as a Way of Life community and the Sustainable Integrated Wellness Approach. I have more than a decade of experience in the wellness industry and on my own personal journey, learning how to tune into and trust my intuition and drown out all the noise. As a certified health coach, detoxification expert, plant-based chef, yoga teacher, and consultant, I will help you distill down the information overload and feel more confident and at ease in your own skin. This season, some of the topics we are focusing on are self-care being essential to self-leadership and leadership, holistic preventative health fundamentals for women as we age, sober curiosity, especially when it comes to optimizing yourself for entrepreneurship, ancient wisdom of cacao and consuming superfoods that are sustainably produced, and finding more pleasure in the patterns and beauty of it all. Here, we know that in order for health and wellness to be sustainable, we need a less is more approach, leaving the information overload and tips overwhelm behind. So take what you love and leave the rest. Let's swan dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Lauren Chiren on the podcast today. She is an expert in menopause, and we're just going to get straight into it. Lauren, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Beautiful. I would love if you would touch on, some of the common myths that you think women of a certain stage in life have, and what are you seeing a lot of in your work in this sphere?
Yeah, so a lot of the work I do is with large corporate organizations across the States, the UK, and Asia, and often there is a belief that someone's experiencing menopause symptoms, they go to their doctor, they get fixed. And that's one of the biggest myths. And the other one is that people actually know that they're menopausal. And the reality is, when I say menopause, by the way, I'm talking about everything from perimenopause, the phase leading into menopause, and all the way through to postmenopause. But the reality is most of us kind of stumble into perimenopause, and it can take us a few years before we figure out what age and stage we're at. to figure out what help and support we need. And by that point, often many of us end up on the verge of crises or in crises. So the biggest myth, I think, is that people know what it is and how to navigate their way through it. But the reality is that people of the generation that's currently coming up to and going through menopause haven't had that background, didn't have that in sex ed, didn't have that in biology at school. And, we need to write that right now.
Yeah. So can you define some terms for us? Because I mean, to me, it was relatively new learning that perimenopause can be like almost a decade. Like I wouldn't have even had it on my sphere of in my late 30s, let's say. And like, what are sort of more the telltale signs that a woman might be experiencing that commonly are misunderstood, and maybe they go to the doctor and they're led down the wrong path?
Sure. So I think to kick off with the definitions, then we know that if you're assigned female at birth, so that could be anyone who's female, transgender, non-binary, gender questioning. If you're assigned female at birth, or you're biologically female, then at some point you're likely to start menstruating, more than likely. And at some point thereafter, you're going to hit this phase called perimenopause. And perimenopause is really where you're coming to the end of your natural fertility. And it's where your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels can start to decline. It can happen over a number of years. And then once you've gone 12 months without a bleed, without a menstrual cycle, we say that you're in menopause. And it's a retrospective diagnosis, really, because you're menopausal when you've had your last bleed. But as we know, we don't know when that is. So that's why we use the 12-month marker. And once you've hit that 12 months, you're thereafter postmenopausal for the rest of your life. And I think what's really fascinating about that is that if you think about the fact that you're going to become menopausal typically between the ages of 45 and 55, which means you've been perimenopausal before then, you're only halfway through your adult life. So you've probably menstruated for an average of 37 years, and then you're going to live for another 37 years on average. So for me, the fact that so many people stumble into this stage of life, and we might touch my story, I definitely did, not knowing what it is or how to get the right help and support is an absolute tragedy, because we're packed with skills, knowledge, and experience. So if someone becomes menopausal at 45, which is normal, they may have been in perimenopause from their late 30s. And so we need to have that education going on much earlier. I became menopausal at 37. So I had my son and I never had another period. And I had no clue. I was feeding my baby, and then I was on contraception that meant that I didn't have a cycle. So I didn't have the obvious thing that we all know about period stopping. Mm-hmm. So does that help a little bit with the definitions before we go into the telltale signs?
Yeah, and I think that's a really common thing, that women go back on birth control post and wouldn't necessarily have that telltale. So I love that you highlight that point.
Yeah, so perimenopause, menopause, but then we have to remember that many of our friends and family are going to have an earlier menopause that is induced through medical interventions for treatments for PMDD, for endometriosis or fibroids. We may know people that have had a hysterectomy or oophorectomy. So there's lots of other reasons why someone would enter a sudden, or what we call a sudden onset menopause, or cliff edge menopause, and symptoms there can be a lot more severe because of a sudden cessation of the estrogen. So to understand the kind of telltale signs, I think if we just look very quickly, estrogen and testosterone and progesterone all play a really big role in our cognitive function, in our heart health, our brain health, our bone health, all our soft tissues, everything to do with our bodies, everything, our digestion. So then if you start to think about just how widespread the role of these hormones are, if they start getting out of sync, it can create chaos. And because we're not prepared for it, we're often not making best choices for ourselves in terms of setting ourselves up to successfully navigate menopause. So the telltale signs for many people are lack of sleep, disturbed sleep, restless leg, itchy skin, suddenly feeling bloated, waking up with a nice flat tummy in the morning, and then by mid-morning, you just look like you're 6 months pregnant. Aching joints, muscles not recovering as quickly. And then all the usual ones we know about: brain fog, mood swings, hot flushes, night sweats, all of those lovely, lovely things. So there are many and various, tinnitus, people getting sort of sensitive reactions to their shampoo and conditioner or their clothes because of what they're washing them in. There's so many different things that these hormones have a role to play. And one of the things people often say to me is, "Oh, I woke up and I went from looking young and vibrant, and the next day I looked really old, and I've got all these lines and wrinkles on my face." And again, because estrogen plays a role in our collagen production, all of these things can have quite a dramatic effect on someone who's not ready and doesn't have the right help and support in place.
Yeah, well, I'd love if you would touch on your story because it really paints the picture as to, why it's important for companies to better understand these things and, potentially even educate and equip their female leaders with these tools. And
Amazing. Sorry. Yeah, I definitely started out thinking, oh, well, let me tell you my story first. So I left my job in my early 40s thinking that I had early onset dementia. I was a new mum. I was a sole parent, unfortunately, and my child had lifelong medical needs. He has lifelong medical needs. So there's a lot of stress around the pregnancy, the relationship breakup leading up to me having him. And I was in a, very senior role. So I had a lot of responsibility on that front as well. And I lived far away from my family, so I didn't have any real local support. And I went from being that kind of typical, what it's like. We all juggle all the balls, right? We somehow or another, no matter how we're feeling, we get up and we go and we go and we go and we go and we keep going. And I don't know about you, Megan, but I'm really bad at asking for help and support. And I definitely was even worse back then. So I got to a point in work where I didn't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable. I definitely wasn't sleeping. And when I say not sleeping, I mean 18 months of less than 2 hours sleep a night. And I didn't have any of the traditional symptoms. I didn't have hot flushes. I didn't know my periods had stopped. And I didn't really have the brain fog as such, but I would have moments of not being able to recall a name or a word getting stuck in my head. But I could still focus on huge spreadsheets with lots of information. I didn't have challenges around that necessarily, but things just felt harder. It felt like I was walking through a treacle and everything just felt harder. One night I drove home from work and I don't even remember the journey home, to the point where I said hello to everybody, put my bags down, said hi to everyone, picked my bags up and went to go back to work, completely forgetting that I'd been at work that day. So that was the point that I was like, okay, something's not right. So I left my job, genuinely thinking it's early onset dementia, thinking I'd have to get someone else to bring up my son, thinking I'd have to kind of find a home to look after me. And that was the moment when my doctor said to me, "It's just menopause." I was the happiest menopausal woman in the UK. Literally.
What maybe led you to believe it was dementia and just your behavior?
Yeah, because I remember watching my grandmother. She passed away from Alzheimer's not long before then, and she would be really lucid and able to talk about lots of stuff, and then just have a complete blank, and that was how I felt. And I just couldn't think of anything else. I was well, I was healthy, I was training, I wasn't ill. Do you know what I mean? I didn't like have an illness. I didn't have a temperature. I hadn't broken a bone. There was nothing. I can't explain it. But I felt disconnected. My self-esteem, my self-confidence were really, really going down the pan very, very quickly. And I remember looking at my doctor when he said to me on my third doctor's visit, he goes, "It's just menopause." I remember looking at him in the eye and going, "We have to stop people going through this. We have to stop employers from losing talented people," right? And it wasn't that I thought I'm such a talented person.
Because you'd already quit at that point?
Oh, yeah. And he's like, "Can you just slow down, take time to you?" And I'm like, no, we need to get people to understand what menopause is. And I was just like, I was so inspired. It was in that moment, I was just like, we just have to. And of course, as you and I know, there's a spike in women leaving their jobs age 45 to 55. Why? Because they're not understanding what menopause is. Their workplaces aren't providing the right help and support, the built environment, the culture, and nothing is supportive of women in the workplace. And that's a bit of an overgeneralization, but typically. And, women will have heavy bleeds, or they'll have leakage. They might have bladder issues. And people don't want to go into a toilet where it's a gender neutral toilet and come out from a cubicle and then go and wash out a menstrual cup in a shared space, right? We want to have toilets where we can go and do our business in, the toilet in privacy. If we need a shower, we can go and do that. And we need to have somewhere we can change. And obviously, that's just for office workers. Then we talk about people on the road and front line and our care staff and all these other people. So we have to start thinking about how we change the workplace so that it's fit for purpose for women. And it's not just for menopause, obviously. It includes menstruation and fertility and pregnancy and all the other life stages that we go through as well. So
Am I correct? I don't know if it's just in North America, but there has been some recent legislation, that's step one, of course. And then what is actually done with it, that there's a certain new understanding or that there needs to be more support and awareness in companies around everything in terms of women's health.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with companies in the States for 10 years now, and it's been great to see the kind of progress they're making. America's really, really, really good at supporting their people generally around fertility. So I often use that as a conversation, because you've got your pregnancy cover now. People are generally good at providing fertility cover or benefits. And the next logical step really is menopause, especially as so many companies are now looking at getting women into senior leadership roles and creating those pathways. So they need to create the right culture around that. And the piece that went to Congress actually was interesting, because if that all goes through and everything, it starts to get filter down through the right people in the right places. I started talking to the US government back in back in 2016, 2017. And it was actually through an amazing gentleman who works in the diversity and inclusion department. So yeah, it's been good just watching those conversations starting to flood through and things start to happen. So
yeah, really encouraging. So I have a couple follow-up. I mean, I have so many, but let's pick our lane here. So one thing I really think is important here is to understand, what can a woman do if she has, like, maybe even just like preventative, like there's not, let's say, any symptoms or anything going on, but just to be in the best state of health so that whatever symptoms and experience are coming down the pipeline, that they're best in the best state of health that they can be.
Sure. So I think the first thing is really to build up your knowledge, right? I think, first of all, we've got to understand what this thing called menopause is, or perimenopause is. And I mean, I run a free menopause basics course, which is something that's my give back. I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through. So I run that as half an hour a day for 3 days. Everyone's welcome. And it's not just people that go through menopause, because we need the people in our life, like the people we live with and work with, to be able to support us as well. So building up that knowledge is really key. Then I would say it's about embracing it. It's going to happen. So yes, there is research going on that means that there may be some things we can do to delay it or push it back, or even prevent it perhaps in the future. The reality is that right now, just getting that mindset in place and embracing it and recognizing that it's going to happen. The more we dread it and don't look forward to it, then we're going to add that as another layer of something to deal with going through it. So knowledge, mindset, and then it's about hydration, making sure we're really well hydrated, making sure we're eating the best foods that we can afford, making sure we're getting a lot of protein into our diet, making sure we're getting lots of good fats into our diet as well. And we're not doing any fatty diets unless we've been instructed to by a nutritionist or a doctor, because we want to make sure we've got the best possible nutrition, because we really are what we eat. We've got to be moving our bodies. We want to maintain our bone strength and our muscle strength, because from 30 onwards, we're losing it. Whatever gender you are, your muscle strength, your bone density is only going in one direction. So we need to keep using it. We're living much longer now than ever before. So with all of that in mind, it really is about knowledge, taking care of yourself, learning to say no.
Yes, I love that you touched on that one.
Yeah, one of the great things about, being, I don't know, I work with incredible women who are so good and so capable that they're so great at saying yes and then wonder why they've said another yes when actually they meant no or not now. So really, really taking a moment to breathe and understand that it's okay to say no, and actually it's okay to delegate as well. And actually, the more you delegate and push out to other people, the more you're empowering them to be able to do stuff. So I think they would be my kind of top tips. And if I could get everyone in their late 20s and 30s to really, really, get into that, I would be seeing far less of the struggles that people are having right now in menopause.
I love your passion around this. So what and also you touched on the point there that we're living longer. So is that sort of one of the reasons that we're seeing this, I don't want to say it's a trend, but it just seems like it's so much more talked about, and largely because so many more women are going through this. And I think there's a lot of positive changes in what's talked about in public, and that's a very positive thing. And at the same time, the reality is we are living like significantly longer, and therefore, to your point, it's not just the later stages of your life that you need to consider what life post menopause is like, right?
Yeah, and I think if you look back on, we have a thing called the Office of National Statistics here in the UK, and if you look back only 100 years, people were becoming menopausal in their mid-50s and they were dead by 60. So in just 100 years, we're living 20 plus years longer. In the States and the UK, women are living to their early mid 80s as an average. And so many are living much, much longer than that. And equally, women are now in the workplace working longer and later into life than they ever have before. Both in the US and the UK, women over 50 are the fastest growing economically active group. So we are making more decisions. We're using our pounds, we're using our dollars to influence, and we're using our voice in a way that we've never done before, and we're holding down roles and positions that we've never held before. So we have to adapt the workplace. We have to adapt the economy to support women in a way that we've never been supported before. And I'll just actually take that one step further. We naturally have to start doing research on women's health.
Yes. Yeah, not just on men and applying it to women, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think women that are, or I guess, what are some messages you'd like women to have to maybe shift their mindset around menopause? I love that you like just embrace it. It's happening. Uh, but also like that it's not negative. It's not like the end. I know so many women in this stage that are telling me this is one of the best stages, if not the best stage of my life, and are completely changing the narrative. Are you seeing a lot of that?
Increasingly. I think that for me personally, obviously, it's been an absolute gift. And, I'm doing things now that I've never done before, working with governments directly, standing on stages of thousands of people, speaking out in CNN and BBC. And I would never have done stuff like that in my life. I would never be the front person, the person on stage. But I love it because I get to go out and help people. And we've got so much. I think I said this before, maybe I'm repeating myself, but we are packed with skills, knowledge, and experience. We've got so much to give back to our families, our communities, our workplaces, our economy. And when you look around the world, there's a real division between those of us that are really down on menopause and those of us and those countries which are really up on and see it as a second spring, or see it as, the matriarchs of society, the people that we look up to and we go to for advice and support. And I just love a little bit more of that. So let's change the narrative of menopause.
Oh, yeah, I just got goosebumps with that last bit. So thank you. It's been an absolute honor. I'm looking forward to going through your course. Can you tell us that's available on your website? Where's the best place to connect with you and find that free resource?
Yeah, no, womenofacertainstage.com. The courses are always updated. The free course runs every 2 months. It's live and we run it at different times. So depending on what time zone you're listening to this in, it will run at a time zone for you throughout the year.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and for being here today. And look forward to connecting more with you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Are you looking to surround yourself with like-minded women, be them leaders in the corporate sphere or other entrepreneurs that are interested in having a little bit of community, compassion, accountability, inspiration, motivation, wisdom around their own wellness journey? We're all about agency. We're all about less is more. Super fun monthly events, lots of tidbits of inspiration. Most content is shared via audio, so you can grab it and go as you're folding the laundry or commuting. And it's really just nice to have some place to check into when you're feeling like you need to carve a little bit more space for yourself. You need to up your ante slightly on your self-care and you're just not sure what to focus on. It's a beautiful source of community and I'm really excited to keep building it with you. So do reach out if you are interested in joining. I will also share the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being here. Hey there, one last thing I wanted to share with you. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help us grow the show, and this being so important to me to get this message out to more women to help them optimize their wellness and ultimately their lives. This is my mission, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could support the podcast by rating and reviewing. Thanks in advance. Have a good one.